All right, we're going to do a first look here for the DraftKings Week 5 fantasy football slate. This is the Fantasy Football Millionaire Contest. Obviously, this is not my preferred contest to play in, but I think it's always cool to look at from a viewership standpoint. So let's go ahead and talk about this slate here. And right now it's showing me, oh, that's because I did that. Cool. All right. So at the top of the quarterback range, we have Kyler Murray, we have Tom Brady, Aaron Rodgers, and Jalen Hurts, all rounding out from 7 to 8K. Again, this is the second week in a row that the quarterback pricing has gone down significantly. And that has a lot to do with the guys that are not on the slate, meaning the Chiefs, the Ravens, and then obviously Russ and Matthew Stafford, as we already noted that they're going to be playing in primetime this week. So Kyler Murray should garner quite a bit of ownership at the top here. For the matchup that he had last week, you kind of expected it to be a little bit lower of a performance. 22 DraftKings points here against the Rams is not the worst, honestly, and he's probably the safest, has the safest floor out of any quarterback on the slate this week. The rushing attempts were still there again, and San Francisco's defense I definitely don't respect as much as the Rams defense. Arizona coming off of another win. They are the only undefeated team in the league right now. So Kyler Murray, the pass attempts will be there, the rush attempts will be there. It's just a matter or not if he gets in the end zone, on the ground, or through the air, or how many times. So Kyler Murray, always in play here, cash game staple, and should be a little bit more affordable this week as he usually is in that 85 to 8,800 range. We have some breaking news. I want to see if we can get that confirmed here, just so I don't spend more time on it than I have to. But I'll wait for that to come in, and we can talk about the rest of the quarterbacks here for the time being. Jalen Hurts sitting at 7K against Carolina is very interesting. I think that the floor of this dude, paired with his ceiling, gives him one of the best combinations of fantasy points on the slate and in the league, you could argue. Top three quarterback is what we were giving him around August when we were making these kind of predictions. So Jalen Hurts, floor for him is 21, which we saw in week 2. I think the amount of volume he has on the ground with the upside of getting touchdowns as well as always being in play for that 300-yard bonus is very, very enticing. Eagles should be playing from behind again. And yeah, I think that this is a fantastic spot for Mr. Hurts here at 7K. So if you want a similar floor slash close to the upside of Kyler Murray, Jalen Hurts will save you $1,000 to get there. That's a very, very good price tag for him. I was kind of surprised that it came in as it did. Tom Brady going up against Miami, not as much of a cash game spot, definitely tournaments. And then Aaron Rodgers. People will flock to this, whether it be FanDuel or DraftKings, but at the same time, it seems a little bit of a shakier spot just because I don't know how close since he's going to be able to take this one. And the Packers have been, they've been able to score however they want. So like Rodgers, 2 up weeks, 2 down weeks. You could say that, San Francisco one was okay, but you want more at that price tag for sure. I do believe that we have that breaking news. It is the Stefan Gilmore news. So talking about the Panthers, it seems like they are the ones that are going to be getting Stefan Gilmore here. That was one of my guesses this morning, so I'm surprised that it happened as fast as it did. Also surprised that he went to, well, I'm not surprised he went to Carolina. There were rumors that, and we know if you don't know now, he was supposed to go, or he's from Carolina. That's what I was trying to get at. He's from Carolina, and yeah, I think that that's definitely an interesting spot. They also just got CJ Henderson too. Carolina making some moves here, and yeah, that's pretty awesome actually for them. If he went to the Bucks, I was going to flip out, but we'll see how that affects them moving forward. They are trading him to the Panthers in exchange for a 2023 6th-round pick, which is a steal for the Panthers, honestly. I know that they do have the cap space for that too. That is interesting. Chat, who wins that trade? I'm pretty sure that You can make the argument that, I don't know, bad locker room decision. Maybe he didn't. Maybe he wanted more money. Patriots mutually accepted to part ways, and then Carolina gets that, and Pats didn't really get anything outside of peace of mind, I guess. Is that yeah, peace of mind is like literally the only thing. Yeah, Stefan Gilmore went to South Carolina University. Yep, all makes sense. Back in his hometown. I am very interested. Maybe this is a long term play for him. We'll see if the Panthers make any moves to keep him long term, because obviously they've had some injuries of their own. So this could be very very interesting for Gilmore in the secondary if everybody stays healthy. So yeah, very big news. Interesting that the Patriots were only able to get a sixth round for him, which is strange. But anyway, let's continue talking about the quarterbacks. He probably wouldn't be in line to play against Jaylen Hurts this week, but we'll see. I've seen faster things happen. Okay, under 7K for the quarterbacks here. Dak Prescott against New York. Prescott needs touchdowns to, at least so far, to be able to hit value here. We've seen in the 3 games that he's done really well. He's had 3 touchdowns, 3 touchdowns, 4 touchdowns. Has taken care of the ball a little bit better last week than he did in the previous 3 weeks. Um, he could have lost 4 fumbles and only lost 1. That's pretty impressive, actually. So yeah, Dak Prescott. The passing volume is definitely not there outside of the Week 1 matchup against Tampa Bay, which we expected. Now, the last 3 weeks they've relied heavily on their ground game. Just last week, the all the touchdowns went to Prescott, whereas Elliott and Pollard did most of the work to get there. This is going to be probably an ever flowing conversation that we have. Can we trust Dak Prescott at this price tag? I think that you can. In this matchup, I worry that Dallas is just going to run the ball the entire game. But we'll see. New York put up a pretty solid game last week against the Saints, and maybe they'll keep this one close. Maybe it'll be a competition. So there aren't very many games on this slate to look at from a stackability point where you're like, I have to get this game. I have to get this game. Detroit, Minnesota is looking like one of the best ones in the early window. And then these last 2 games, San Francisco, Arizona, and New York, Dallas, are also being looked at as, I guess, the games you would want to go to. But this slate is very unique in many aspects, and that's one of them. Don't really have too many games that you're just gravitating towards. It's like you have to get these spots, kind of like we've seen the past several weeks with those afternoon spots. So Dak Prescott, all in all, is fine. Justin Herbert, tougher matchup against Cleveland. I'm interested to see how that offensive line is going to handle things. A decent price tag at 6'8". You don't really get the rushing upside with Herbert, obviously, but the passing volume is certainly there. Hasn't hit 300 yards in the last 2 weeks, surprisingly enough, against Kansas City, but still scored 30 points there with those 4 touchdowns. So Herbert, always in play for tournaments. A little bit of a tougher matchup this week, though. Down the list here, Sam Darnold against Philly. This is going to be a very interesting spot, and I'm still appalled that Sam Darnold leads the league in touchdown rush attempts. He has 5 total rushing touchdowns, and he almost has. He's tied with the amount of passing touchdowns that he has through 4 weeks. So Sam Darnold is becoming this fantasy production monster over the last 2 weeks with Christian McCaffrey gone or injured, and I think, man, it's crazy to see that all this production from him, but it was something that I expected, but I just didn't expect it to be this fast. So maybe Adam Gase really is the woat here. So 300 plus yards passing in all the last 3 games, and almost got it in that first game. So he's not necessarily a lock by any means because he's only done it 3 times in a row, and those times were all really, really close, even in garbage time last week too. So good matchup for him here. I think that we can exploit this Philly defense and Philly secondary with the weapons that he has. I love the price tag of Darnold, and I think that he has, until McCaffrey comes back, this rushing upside that we just didn't think that we'd ever see from Sam Darnold. 8 attempts. Now I know he only got 11 yards, but he did get 2 touchdowns in week 3 and then 6 attempts for 35 yards with 2 touchdowns against the Cowboys. They're just going to be using him and in the goal line when everybody thought maybe they would give it to Chuba, maybe they would give it to Royce Freeman. I don't know, Terrace Marshall. I don't know, but Sam Darnold seems to be the guy that's getting the ball in his hands inside the 5, and maybe he's making those RPO calls himself. Regardless of the case, he's in play at this price tag for tournaments and possibly cash games. So, Kirk Cousins against Detroit. Kirk has been one of the most consistent quarterbacks until last week. 3 weeks in a row was a very, very good QB, a top 10 QB. You could even say top 5 QB DFS-wise. And last week he put up the stinker against the Browns defensive line. Vikings O-line is bottom 10 in the league, so doesn't surprise me there. At the same time, Kirk, do you trust this spot a little bit more? I think you do. I think that the Vikings get back on track this week against the Lions. Kirk Cousins should be able to have at least 35 plus passing attempts. Should be able to get in the end zone a couple times here. And 6,500 is a decent price tag for tournaments. I'm only playing him in tournaments this weekend to stack with his options and possibly bring it back with a Lions player. Some of these prices on quarterbacks are getting pretty juicy because they all kind of got a price discount this week. Daniel Jones at 6K, we know what his upside is. He saw it last week. Tough, obviously a game against the New Orleans Saints that I didn't expect him to be good in, but he definitely showed through and showed us again that he's got a little bit of a rushing floor going here, as well as the ability to put up some massive yards through the air. Daniel Jones, only one stinker through 4 weeks, which is pretty impressive, and the one stinker actually was against the team that he should have had the most success in. So Daniel Jones, 6K, great price tag. I can get behind that for sure. Ryan Tannehill against Jacksonville. I need to see if they have anybody back for a receiver this week in order for me to make that call. So right now, it's a stalemate. I'm not going to touch it if I don't hear any news. Let's see. Lawrence against Tennessee. Don't mind the matchup here. Trevor Lawrence started to get it going a little bit against Cincinnati last week, starting to kind of move forward, start to get a little bit of fantasy action here. He's just not throwing the ball enough for me. And I know the 51 pass attempts is a lot against Houston, but the other 2 games, didn't love what I saw. And then Cincinnati last week was fine. We saw that he got that rushing touchdown early in the game as well. Trevor Lawrence, you can argue that you probably just want to stay away in general and wait until all this stuff from Urban Meyer blows over. Some of you might not want to do that and take advantage of Tennessee's secondary, who was even beat out by the New York Jets receivers last weekend. So if you want to stack with Lawrence, it's a cheap way to go. You can do that, and that's definitely a GPP option for you. We don't have the news about Jimmy G yet, but he is down here at 5.5 with questionable today. Trey Lance would get the start if Jimmy G is not able to go. He's sitting at 5.7 here. Not a bad GPP option if we get that news, but we'll cover that later in the week. And then going down the list a little bit more, before I do that, I just want to touch on Joe Burrow quickly, 6,100. He's probably going to pop in a lot of models for tournaments this weekend. We saw the upside one time so far, and that's kind of where I stop interest in, because obviously you would expect him to do pretty well against Jacksonville, which he did. So 2 touchdowns is normally where I would expect Joe Burrow to be. Green Bay secondary is a little bit tougher. I know that we're dealing with some injuries right now, but it could be a decent run back option for a receiver for the Bengals. But for Joe Burrow at 6,100, it's just tournaments for me. I'm not really interested. I don't think there's that much upside there. And if there is, it's because of garbage time. So if you want to go that route, you can go that route. Other quarterbacks that I want to talk about before we move on. I'm not on this guy. Josh is more on this play. But Mac Jones going up against Houston is interesting for tournaments. The price tag's certainly there, but again, he has not shown that 20-point upside that I would like to see. But yeah, I think it's definitely a spot we need to monitor moving forward. I think New England players are certainly in play, just not as thrilled about Mac Jones at the price tag for the amount that he's been able to do. The one good thing that we've seen is that he is throwing the ball a lot, and he's, I shouldn't say taking care of it all that well, but definitely played better against Tampa Bay in a really, really terrible weather game. So that's fine. Tournaments only. Definitely not cash game play. And then finally, right before we did this, we saw the news that Justin Fields was named the starter indefinitely. So Matt Nagy is not playing Dalton at QB1 anymore. And he's just giving Fields free reign, which again, I said confidence is everything. Fields is coming off a win against the Detroit Lions. Now they have to go in and play Vegas on the road. Tough place to play. Vegas has looked very good at home as well this season. And yeah, it's going to be a little bit tougher of a matchup. I'm not doing it at all. I have no interest in tournaments here at all. I think that we have to see him get that 15 fantasy point day, which I don't know when it's coming. It might not come yet. He only has one touchdown this entire season, and it was a rushing score in week 1. So for right now, I'm staying away from Fields. I do think that there are interesting options moving forward. And the one thing I did say before we move on to the running back position is Justin Fields is going to be cash game considerable in the next month. But right now, I'm not debating anything related to him until we see a little bit more. I do think that he has the capability to do things, but they're not using him the correct way. And they ran the ball all game with David Montgomery and Damian Williams last game. So I am just going to keep it at a stay away spot for now and wait until either the price tag goes up a little bit because of the good performances, or if he has a good matchup and we're going to stream that and try to take advantage of that floor. Okay, let's go ahead and go to the running backs here. We start off the slate with a 9K Derrick Henry, and the first thing that shocked me with this last week was, to me, Derrick Henry was a better DraftKings play than he was a FanDuel play in week 4. Normally, we never say those words, but for some reason, this year specifically, DraftKings just refuses to price this guy up. He was 8,800 in week 1. He dropped down to 8,300 after a dud game. And after getting 50 DraftKings points, he jumps up to 8,600. And then last week, with no receivers, he jumped up to 8,800. Now he's 9K. I don't care. You're going right back to the well here with Derrick Henry, especially regardless of if his receivers are back. I don't expect A.J. Brown back. Julio might be a game-time decision type of play. But honestly, in this spot against Jacksonville, if I'm Tennessee, I think I try to stick it out one more week without my receivers and just try to give the ball to Derrick Henry. Henry's going to have the most volume on the slate. He's going to have the most touches. He's going to have 30-plus rushing attempts. The thing that I hope that they do is they give him a little bit more targets this week than they did in last week's performance, where he only got 3. I was really hoping, and I know maybe it's the Seattle script that messed things up in that overtime game, but I was expecting like 4 to 5 targets for Henry last week, and he only got 2, even though both of those receivers were out. Henry he's a lock to get 100 yards again this week. So 3 weeks in a row, 100 rushing yards for King Henry, getting that 3+ DraftKings point bonus for that 100-yard outing. And like I said yesterday, the touchdowns for Henry are going to come back to him in a positive regression type of situation. 3 touchdowns here, obviously huge explosion game. But if you were to tell me that you take that out, you say maybe he gets 1 there, maybe he gets 0, that he only had 1 rushing touchdown against Arizona, Seattle, Indianapolis, and New York Jets. Like, that's an outlier to me. I think that he has that 2 touchdown game here with the upside of 3. So yeah, Henry fully in play. The price tag's too low again. You need 18 for DraftKings value here, and the tournament upside is obviously through the roof. We'll see him. We saw him get 50 DraftKings points in a week 2, but he has honestly 40-point upside like 4 more times this season. I would not be shocked if he had 5 total games over 40 DraftKings points. So yeah, for me, Derrick Henry, smash play once again. I won't consider this a fade until he's probably 10,000 plus. Christian, you lock in Henry and build around that? Absolutely this week for cash games, 100%. For tournaments, you are going to there's enough running backs on this slate where you can probably get leverage off of this, and we'll talk about one here in a second. But yeah, Derrick Henry in cash games, lock and load. 18 DraftKings points. You can get that in his sleep. So Alvin Kamara going up against Washington. I'm not going to talk about Christian McCaffrey because he's not playing this week. There's no way. Kamara going against Washington here. The main thing that I'm concerned about for Kamara moving forward is the fact that they are not using him in the pass game at all this year. He has 2 receiving touchdowns, but the targets 4, 6, and 4, and the big one here, 0 last week against New York, who gives up a lot of targets to the running back position. They're just using him as a running back, which is so weird. And we were waiting for this for such a long time, but also hoping he would get the receptions, that now it's like I'm not even interested in the play on DraftKings because he doesn't even get work in the passing game. Maybe this is an outlier a little bit, but this certainly isn't. Like 4, 6, and 4 targets. If he's going to get in that range, I'm not interested unless the price is cheaper. And that's pretty much the main reason I'm staying away from him this week. So Alvin Kamara, sure, this number is fantastic. 24 touches and 26 touches here. Those are great. And that price tag is juicy. But man, I don't even know if I want to do this in tournaments. Like if he's only going to put up 120 yards is a great game for a running back, especially on 26 touches. But if you have nothing in the receiving department, then what are we doing here? I mean, I don't know. Like I'd much rather go Derrick Henry, and Dalvin Cook is sitting here at 8,400. The problem with him is touches. He got 9 touches, and obviously wasn't as efficient in the passing game coming back from that injury that he sustained earlier in the season. This is the best matchup that Cook's going to get all year, and I think we can bank on him being that 20 touch back again. I'd much rather take Cook over Alvin Kamara as of this moment. Like I said, though, there are a ton of pay down options for running back. So I think people are going to go with the approach of going Derrick Henry and then paying down it with 2 spots and using one of them in the flex. For tournaments, though, if you want to load up and jam them in with Henry, Kamara, and Cook in tournaments, that's totally fine. You can do the same thing with Aaron Jones. You can even do the same thing with Austin Eckler. Like I said, a lot of these guys are in really, really good spots. And we got Zeke Elliott sitting down here at 6K or 7K, and he has had a couple of monster performances in a row. The touchdowns are starting to get there for Zeke. He's returning to his former self. We kind of saw this one coming with after that first week stinker and telling you guys that, don't count him out yet. He's going to be good. And look at that. He's great. So Ezekiel Elliott is going to be a primary piece in this team's red zone offense as well. And he's getting the touches that we saw and thought he would get this season. 7K is a great price tag for Zeke against the Giants. John says, really love paying down at running back for 3 catching backs this week. Yep, tournaments, we'll definitely get to those guys. I like them quite a bit. Let's do that. Let's go ahead and talk about these guys that are a bit lower in this range. I think with all the guys we're going to talk about this week, that a guy like Chuba Hubbard for me just isn't in play anymore. We saw that there's a lot of risk there with Sam Darnold, and he's just not getting as many touches as promised from Matt Rule in that system. Okay, so talking about the guys that are going to be in some really juicy spots, we have James Robinson at 6K, who we'll have to see what happens with Carlos Hyde, but if Carlos Hyde misses again, that's a nice juicy spot there. For tournaments, we also have Damien Harris, who's going up against Houston. So Damien Harris, a guy that, you obviously are concerned with this number and this number, 6 and 4 attempts in the last 2 weeks. The thing that these two teams have in common, really good rush defense. So I think that Damien Harris is just fine for a bounce back this week. The price tag at 5,500 is definitely doable for cash games as well as tournaments. You have Leonard Fournette sitting here. This is just a plain misprice because they played on Sunday night, and Fournette should not be at 5,200 with the performance he put up without Gio Bernard and Gronkowski on Sunday. So Tampa Bay facing Miami. He should be the Bucs leader in rushing attempts as well as just actual plays of being on the field. I know we shouldn't count out Rojo just yet, but it feels like this is Leonard Fournette's running back spot at the moment. Did not even get a touchdown last week, but did get the passing volume. That is encouraging. 3 for 47, and then got 20 rush attempts. So, yeah, give me Fournette all day. 5.2 is a fantastic price. I think he's viable on both sites. And I know we're going to keep going down the list here talking about the players that John had mentioned earlier. We'll just note that Peyton Barber, another piece of news came in. He's got a turf toe injury. He's out this week and possibly the next several weeks with that injury. So a little bit less stress for Josh Jacobs owners. Kenyon Drake also dealing with his own set of things, but he should be good to go. So the guys that we get into now, we get into this range where I think these are more tournament plays, but guys like Kenneth Gainwell here, who has now had two back-to-back games of, just one really good game of 20 points. The 12 is interesting. It's a good spot for tournaments this week one here. But the rushing attempts are the main concern for me. Like, he's going to be targeted in the passing game. We did see him get a goal line rush too, so that's a little bit out of my comfort zone. But for tournaments, Gainwell can be that guy, especially if we follow the news that both him and Sanders are going to be used in this sort of RB1A, 1B type of tandem. So don't mind this for DraftKings. He's a much better play on this site than he is on FanDuel. Okay. Yeah, if they did that against the Cowboys, what will they be able to do against the Eagles? Fair point. Okay. So we still don't, again, we have to, Fournette news, we have to keep an eye on Gio Bernard here. Other news, Joe Mixon is currently questionable, and that would leave things open for a guy like Samaje Perine, who we talked about yesterday. Don't know why I can't spell today. Samaje Perine is $4,000, which is the minimum price for running backs on DraftKings. Not too focused on going here. I think that this is a stay away if he actually is ruled a starter, and people probably will say, like, Jared, this is a smash home run spot, right? And honestly, I don't know. And I don't know if I'm willing to go here just yet. I know it's only Wednesday. We don't have any definitive news. It feels like a really shaky spot. And then also remember that they do have a few other running backs on their roster that would step in to help P. Ryan with the workload. So this is kind of just a wait-and-see approach for me, and we'll have a better idea what to do with it on Saturday and Sunday. Okay, and then finally, I think that J.D. McKissick and Antonio Gibson should be looked at and considered here against New Orleans, but I'm more interested in going with J.D. McKissick due to just the passing volume that we could expect here in this spot, because I do think Washington's trailing. I don't normally like targeting running backs against New Orleans, but the pass-catching ones seem to do pretty well. Yep, touchdown Gainwell already. I think that he's fine for tournaments. Should be a good spot for him at a fairly decent price tag, especially if he's going to, again, be the 1A or 1B there. Outside of these guys, I'm not super thrilled about any of them. Again, I think it's very important to see what happens with these New England running backs this week. We saw a few things. Ramondre Stevenson, we'll see if he's been like going back and forth on this coaching decision thing. Only has played in week one and only had one rushing attempt, which was a lost fumble. So with that being said, we haven't seen much J.J. Taylor either. The guy that we have seen is Brandon Bolden, who came in. Didn't light the world on fire, but he still got 6 targets for 6 off of 6 receptions for 51 yards here with the 11.1 DraftKings performance. That is only a tournament play, but again, that kind of strengthens my point to the whole Damien Harris situation. Damien Harris is extremely underpriced for this week in this spot. Yeah, okay. Honestly, we'll have to just wait until the news shakes out, and then we can make some more decisions on these running backs. But right now, there's a lot of really good payoff spots. Henry, I'm on the fence with Kamara, but Cook, Jones, Eckler, even Elliott at 7K. Those are all guys I would love to look at for cash and tournaments. Now, for wide receiver, again, these prices are slowly starting to creep up, but there are a lot of guys that are still underpriced, especially for DraftKings PPR type scoring. Devonte Adams, a little bit of a down week last week, should have a bounce back spot here. I did not expect Randall Cobb to get 2 touchdowns But yeah, I mean, him being on the outside a little bit more opens things up for Randall Cobb in the slot. I understand, I get that, but Aaron Rodgers is going to keep trying to find Devontae. This is very unlike this duo where they're so I wouldn't say inconsistent is not the right word, just a down week in terms of being able to pull in the targets that Rodgers has thrown at him. So I'm not concerned whatsoever. I think Devonte Adams is firmly in play in both formats, cash games and tournaments. Justin Jefferson and Adam Thielen are both in this range here. Justin Jefferson, obviously, $1,100 more than Thielen. Both have huge upside in this spot against Detroit, so I'm interested in both of those guys for tournaments. They also make the cash game consideration for me. DeAndre Hopkins in a tougher matchup, but at the same time, the 49ers are very, very weak at the cornerback position, and they lost a lot of guys last weekend. So Hopkins, you can go back to him. I don't mind this at all. And he has had 2 down weeks in a row, but I do think that this is a fine spot to get him in the end zone again for a touchdown. So don't mind that. DJ Moore, finally sitting up here now at 7,500. He's been probably and arguably the most consistent wide receiver in the league outside of Cooper Kupp. And he has had 3 massive performances back to back to back. The consistency in the targets is there. It means that Sam Darnold's looking for him. It means that DJ Moore is the first read. It means that there's chemistry there. And I think that DJ Moore has another explosion spot here against the Philadelphia Eagles. We saw what Tyreek Hill was able to do last week. I know there's a huge difference in discrepancy there, but I love the matchup for DJ Moore. I think he's fantastic. Terry McLaurin, we saw what the Giants were able to do last week against a rougher, kind of beat up New Orleans Saints secondary. If Taylor Heineke is in at quarterback, he is going to find and go out of his way to find Terry McLaurin. McLaurin could have had an even bigger game last week, but he only was able to haul in 6 out of the 13 targets that went his way, 2 of those being touchdowns. Like I said, if Heineke's on the field, McLaurin's going to be the guy that's the beneficiary there. So this is definitely a tournament play as well. Still too cheap for the amount of action he's getting. Mike Williams, a little bit of a down week last week on his birthday. Comes in against Cleveland. Don't mind that. This is really, really high for Mike Williams, though. You can probably just go to Keenan Allen, save some money, make things happen there. Other guys in this spot, we have to know what's going on with the Tennessee receivers before we make any news and decisions there. I guess we can talk about Debo Samuel, who's been out of this world consistent through the last 4 weeks. I know he had a stinker against Green Bay, but 12 targets and 2 games. He has 3 double-digit target games, has gotten in the end zone a few times, and is always able to be a threat in the rushing department. So I like Debo. Is he a cash game play? No, because we don't know what's going on with the quarterback position yet. It's going to be very interesting to see what happens with Samuel for the rest of the way if they make that change and go with Trey Lance this week. Let's see if we can save some money at receiver and look down at these other guys. I think Keenan Allen is way too cheap based on the game that he had last week. I know we probably wanted a little bit more from him, but 11 targets is still nothing I can complain about. The touchdowns will get there for Allen eventually, but they went Austin Eckler's way on Monday night. But still, 13 targets here, 8 there, 12 there, 11 there. Still one of the most heaviest targeted receivers in the league, and he should be targeted again against Cleveland in this spot. And what I expect to be, maybe a little bit more competitive than Cleveland's last game was. Okay. CeeDee Lamb's price tag is really cheap too, and this should go up at some point, but he's had 2 kind of stinker games in a row. Maybe it's just because we are seeing Dallas move the ball more, and they've also had 2 games where they haven't needed to throw the ball in the second half, where they just eat the clock out. This kind of feels like a similar spot. And that's kind of why CeeDee Lamb is not going to be a cash game play, but he's going to be a tournament play for me, at least as of right now. Okay. Brandon Cooks, only viable receiver. We saw Anthony Miller get cut and released from, or sorry, not cut. He was cut from the Texans this morning. So, Brandon Cooks, I don't know. I mean, even in down games, he got 7 targets, and the team didn't even put up any points. So, If he can do this at a bare minimum without the team even putting up any points, I think you can look his way. 6,100 is too cheap for the production that he's going to be getting. It's just, what kind of Davis Mills do we see this week against the New England Patriots? So if I'm Bill Belichick, I don't care about taking Mills out of the game. I focus on taking Brandon Cooks out of the game. That would be my number one priority. So that to me makes Cooks tournament viable, but not cash game viable. So I think that you're spending $6,100 on a guy who could get taken out of the game against the best coach in the history of the NFL. So we've always seen that there's one guy that gets X'd out and one guy that gets forced out of games when they play against New England Patriots. It's going to be Cooks this week, and I'm calling it now. I'm calling my shot. He has another really, really down week against the Patriots. Okay. And by the way, that Brandon Cooks play is probably going to be pretty popular. For how many people are going to be rostering New England this week, I would expect a lot of people to run it back with Brandon Cooks in a spot where he could get completely shut down. So, okay, moving on. Michael Thomas made his way back into the player pool. That's fun. There aren't really too many spots where that's kind of stand out in this range. Jamar Chase makes some sense if Alexander's not willing to go, and if T. Higgins, his teammate, is also not able to go. We'll monitor the T. Higgins news, but I do think that you can look for a guy like Jamar Chase, even a guy like Tyler Boyd at 5'3". He's in a good spot too. Marvin Jones, 5,700, is certainly in play. I know he had a little bit of a down week on Thursday Night Football, but the last 3 weeks were definitely trending up for him. The price tag is the highest it's been all season, but if we can get a competitive game and against Tennessee's secondary that got burned by Jets receivers last week, I think that he's going to get that 9 to 11 to 8 targets, that 8 to 10 range, and should have touchdown equity here with no DJ Chark. And let's go. I think if you want to go this way, I feel like I'm leaning tournaments here, but Jacoby Myers the last 2 weeks has looked very, very solid. Back-to-back weeks of over 10 targets. He has yet to find the end zone yet, so when he does, it's going to be a blow-up explosion spot for Jacoby. Back-to-back games of over 15 DraftKings points is really good for this price tag of 5,600 against the worst defense in the league. I like some other receivers here. A lot of them really don't stick out for cash games, but this one does. Devontae Parker, 5,400 against that Tampa Bay secondary that's been really, really beat up. And they just got Richard Sherman, who I'm not afraid of. I think as long as Devontae gets the targets, I wish he was a little bit more efficient with them, but it seems to be that Jacoby is locking in on Parker. I do think that this is a valid spot to play him. Antonio Brown against Miami, too cheap. We'll have to see what happens with these injuries to Shepard and to T. Higgins. AJ Green scored that touchdown last week. He's sitting there at 5,100 as well. Other spots that I like, I'm not playing Hunter Renfrow in cash, but in tournaments, like, you can't deny that he actually is a really, really good play week in and week out for consistency. Now, this is kind of where things get a little bit dirtier. Nothing really stands out. The one thing that stood out last week was the Tennessee receivers, but at the end of the day, they really did nothing. Chester Rogers got there late, but that was only because of garbage time and overtime. So I think I'm staying away from Tennessee altogether, even though I would like to see what I could do. Again, we'll just wait and see what happens with those wide receivers, if they practice or whatever's going to happen with them. You can look to so Will Fuller got put on the IR today, and Jalen Waddle now comes into play here. I also wanted to bring that up when I was talking about Devontae Parker. So they are down Will Fuller. Jalen Waddle's definitely a tournament-only play, but he's also going to be taking advantage of that Tampa Bay secondary that's a little bit shaky right now. Laviska Shenault kind of feels like a cash game play. Again, need to see what happens with Carlos Hyde, but we saw when Carlos Hyde was not on the field, he was able to take some of those really short A-dot throws, as well as being used as kind of the guy that actually does the Marvin Jones role, where Jones kind of moved into that DJ Chark role last week. Shenault was actually able to run routes down the field, and you saw that with the 7 targets and the 6 receptions for almost 100 yards. So if we're seeing this type of production from him, versus this one in week 3. Give me this 7 to 8 target range for him, and I think that he'll be just fine at that price. Okay. Not too sold on a lot of this. Again, a lot of these matchups are really rough on paper for a lot of these teams, and there's really not too many like must-have stack options in terms of game stacks. So it's going to be kind of hard to find some of these guys and find some of these dumpster dive plays for tournaments. But again, I'm not super like Chester Rogers got a $700 price bump against the Jacksonville Jaguars. That's tournaments only for me. I'm not going to touch that in cash. Same thing with Westbrook. Kind of underperformed last week given the fact that he got 8 targets. So if you want to back that theory and say, hey, if both wide receivers are out again for Tennessee, they're playing Jacksonville, and if you think Westbrook's going to get 6 to 8 targets here, he's going to get higher than 5.9 DraftKings points. So it's a tournament only thing. It's not cash. So as of right now, there really isn't much I'm looking at. And then Anthony Miller got cut from Houston. So there's not much I'm looking at for cash games down here. I think that the guys that, kind of where it stops would be the Laviska Shenault play at 4,800. But there's tournament plays all over this slate. So I like that quite a bit. Okay. Let's talk about the tight ends now. It's probably going to be a pretty short conversation because I think on FanDuel it's definitely Darren Waller or bust, right? as FanDuel tight end normally is. The thing with Darren Waller is that he's just Derek Carr's dude, and even though he's come back down to earth in 3 of the last 4 games after the obvious huge explosion 19 target spot, but 7 targets, 7 targets, 7 targets, consistency. And 7,300 feels expensive. Granted that he's only done it once in the last 3 weeks, and the only reason he did it was because he had a touchdown on Monday night. So Chicago, normally a team we can exploit, and their coverage linebackers just cannot, and they will not be able to cover Darren Waller. So he's in play for tournaments. On DraftKings, it still feels like it's a little bit expensive. We can talk about some other plays for cash games that make sense. Kittle against Arizona, if we find out that he's playing, is in play. We also need to know who's playing quarterback for that team. TJ Hawkinson as a run back in Minnesota stacks is nice at 5,500. Dallas Goedert against Carolina, also nice at 5,100. Goddard's had some touchdown success recently in that last game. I would wish that we had a little bit more targets last week, especially against Kansas City, but can't complain there. Logan Thomas is going to be out, or at least questionable coming into the week, sustaining that injury to the lower body on Sunday. Interesting to see what happens to him. The guys that would benefit are, probably Terry McLaurin, to be honest with you, but Ricky Seals-Jones. I know people are probably going to flock to this play this week. It's not a bad play, but there's really limited work here. And this reception, if you remember correctly, was in the back of the end zone. And it was a fantastic throw, even better catch. So he did get 4 targets. That's probably okay. If you're 2,500, you don't need much. You need 5 DraftKings points. So Seals-Jones is probably in the player pool, but I don't love the play, especially against New Orleans. So Kai says Ertz over Goddard. Ertz has definitely surprised me this year, especially coming off of 2 games now that he's had 7 and 8 targets in. And he's had over 10 DraftKings points in 2 consecutive weeks. When's the last time that Zach Ertz had over 10 DraftKings points back-to-back weeks? Probably a long time ago. If the targets are staying there, then I think we need to look at this play a little bit closer. So we'll have to monitor that. For sure, he's in tournament play in consideration, though. Okay, anybody else down here? Maybe some Mike Gaseki love. It's gross. I don't love it. He's 4,200, which, again, don't really want to go there. So any other spots we can consider? I guess Dalton Schultz. That feels a little bit trappy, coming back from a 2 touchdown, he has 3 touchdowns in the last 2 weeks. The targets seem to be getting there. So if we think that they are, he's got 3 games out of 4, which he's had 10 or more DraftKings points in. So maybe Dalton Schultz is actually good? I don't know. Probably not, but I think that this is a spot where eventually the price tag's going to get to a spot where I don't feel comfortable playing it. This week is not one of those weeks. And finally, I guess you have to consider the New England tight ends. That's a really gross play because both of them just really don't. They kind of just step on each other's toes. And I know that they both caught touchdowns against Tampa Bay, but trying to rely on that for cash is just so nasty. Tournaments, go ahead, fire them up, pair them with Mac Jones, and just hope that you get lucky once or twice. Uh, Cameron Brate kind of disappointed against the Patriots on Sunday Night Football, but he did get 6 targets, which was encouraging to see. Very inconsistent with those, and if you remember, if you watched the game, Tom was trying to throw it to him, was trying to force it to Brate, and most of the time it just wasn't happening. They were either a foot off or he was just in really good coverage. So I think that Cameron Brate at 3,300 is in play for tournaments. However, I'll probably stay away from cash in that one. Ingram, I know that he was popular last week for a few reasons. Again, didn't do that well with this. And again, I think it's just the way that he's used in this offense is just nasty. It's just not good. And this could be a situation where Sterling Shepard comes back too. So got to monitor that. They even used him for a basically tight end, wheel route, like trying to sweep that into the end zone. Failed miserably. And then even the announcers were saying that why would you use Ingram that way? Why are you trying to keep using Ingram as that kind of goal line threat? Just throw him the ball. So we'll see what happens with Ingram. I'm not touching it this week. I think that there's going to be I don't know. It's just not a good cash gameplay. Ferkser was hoping that he would get involved more. This is kind of at the bottom of the barrel where I would kind of want to shoot outside of Ricky Seals-Jones. But we saw Anthony Ferkser be on the field for quite a lot. We saw a lot of 2 tight end sets for the Tennessee Titans in their run scheme and their run game. 5 targets for him at 3,100 is a good spot against Jacksonville. I expect him to be a little bit. I would hope that he would be used a little bit more, getting into that 5 to 7 target range. But they love running the football, so Ferkser is just going to be that dude apparently this year. So again, need to monitor the targets for the Titans and monitor their practice logs for the week. Okay, yeah. So in all honesty, there's no real smash home run tight end punt play yet, and Darren Waller is expensive, so kind of a wait and see approach here. But if you want, I think some of these guys under 5K are definitely worth considering. DST this week, we talked about the Patriots and where do you just leave, you just try to find $5,000 and pay for them. This feels like a spot where they're expensive, right? I don't ever really like paying for a defense above 4K, but these 3 defenses this week are in really, really good spots. You have Denver against Pittsburgh, who we already know Big Ben's dealing with an injury, a hip injury, so that's really, really bad for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Miami against Tampa Bay. Tampa Bay's defense is always in play, especially at home. And then finally, the New England Patriots are in a spot against Houston that they are salivating and licking their chops to get into it here this weekend. So I would not be surprised if the Patriots put up 15 to 18 DraftKings points here and completely just shell the Houston Texans again. But there's just, I don't know, it's very, very hard to pay up at DraftKings. So we'll see and monitor that situation. But in tournaments, maybe go for it. Titans against Jacksonville, risky play. I don't normally love this range either of the mid 3Ks. Sometimes we'll have teams in good spots, but right now for this week I don't like much. This is an interesting play here. The Cowboys at 2,800 against the New York Giants. Daniel Jones was taking care of the ball a little bit better, but this should be a game where the Giants have to play up in pace and try to come back from behind. I like the Dallas Cowboys, and that defense, they've been able to be really consistent and take the ball away from teams, which is fantastic for fantasy. Also some pretty good and solid sack numbers last week against Carolina. Very, very consistent so far. They've forced quarterbacks to throw 2 picks in every single game, which is impressive because you have Tom Brady here in week 1. Can we rely on this every week? No, but I think it's a good enough spot to where you can say, hey, I think that they're going to get 1 or 2 turnovers here, and there's upside for possibly a defensive touchdown always. So, I don't know. Not very many punt defenses either. I think Jacksonville is probably the team that people are going to punt this week, and they're going to approach it the same way they approached the Jets of last week too. I will say that I'm on record saying that the Jets were in a better spot DFS wise last week than the Jaguars are this week, but people are going to flock here because they know they can save money, and they saw what the Jets were able to do to that offensive line. Tannehill's in big trouble if he doesn't get his wide receivers back because he has had no time to throw, and they're very, very one-dimensional in their offense at the moment. So Jaguars probably your best defensive bet if you want to pay down. Okay, what we're going to do here is I am going to do, not a full DraftKings lineup because we can't do that. That's against their terms of service. But what we can do is we can give you guys a stack and a bring back with another stack option and kind of build a little bit of a first look GPP type approach here. So what I want to do is because I think there's only a couple games that I really want to stack and feel really good about it. So the first one that I'm going to roll out here is this Philly-Carolina game because I do think that there's some action that we can get on this side of the ball. Normally I would say you can run Jaylen Hurts naked, but I like the spot quite a bit for their defense as they're probably going to have to come back from behind here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pair him with DJ Moore, who's really expensive, and then we're going to save some money. And we are going to roster Zack, Ertz at tight end. So we have 3 players from this game. Jaylen Hurts to his tight end, Zack Ertz, who's looked very, very good the last 2 weeks. And then DJ Moore bringing it back as one of the most consistent receivers in the NFL at the moment. What's going on, Lou? How you doing today? Yeah, what's up? What's going on, Slate Breaker, for a StrongSide stream that I've been able to catch? There you go. There you go, man. There you go. Okay, so I think we have enough here in this game. Let's try to focus on a secondary stack that works from both sides. Now, there aren't very many spots that it will work in, but one that I do think that's probably less popular here is going Aaron Jones from Green Bay, running it back with Tyler Boyd on the other side. The only way I would go about this is if we know that T. Higgins is going to be out. So if Higgins is out, then slide Tyler Boyd in here. And then if he is in, I would totally scratch that and play nobody from Cincinnati. So I think this is a very solid way to start things. And finally, we can put in another guy who I know is not really a DraftKings play, but I like the spot here against Houston. So give me Damien Harris. Leaves you guys with 4,400 left, with the ability to punt that defense. If we put in the punt defense, leaves you guys at 5,600. That's great for maybe a Damian Williams play, maybe a Laviska Shenault play, maybe some Marvin Jones in your life. This is definitely a solid start to the slate. I think that it's going to be pretty contrarian when all said and done, especially stacking the Philly-Carolina game and the mini run back of the Green Bay and Cincinnati game. So don't mind that at all. I think we'll wrap things up here today on that front. So if you haven't, or if you want to watch this stream back, it's going to be uploaded on YouTube in the next 24 hours. It will be up on RotoRadar Daily Fantasy Sports, and then you click on the Week 5 Fantasy Football section, and you'll find it there. You can find all of our Twitch streams. We take the specific parts, whether it's the FanDuel first look, the DraftKings first look, Josh and I's game that we play every Wednesday. We did it yesterday, so because he's out of town right now. They're all up on YouTube, so check it out. Like and subscribe those videos. We appreciate all the support. And let's end this stream out here with a couple more questions.